My name is Ahmed Fadaam. I'm an assistant professor at the School of Communications here at Elon University. This is my fourth year. Just arrived to the States in 2012. I teach mostly Core 110s and also war zone reporting and sometimes 3D animation. We all hear in the news about something called ISIL or Daesh, a new terrorist groups that came to the scene in 2013 and now controlling lots of land in the Middle East, and they are also committing lots of horrible crimes. Also, I want to talk to you about the Iraqi and Syrian refugee crisis. I know that you're reading articles in the newspapers, online, seeing reports on TV that talks about the incredible numbers of Syrian and Iraqi refugees who are trying to seek refuge in Europe and all of the problems that this is creating to some of these countries. So my point of focus today will be on these two countries, Iraq and Syria. And in order to understand what's happening there, we need to know something about these two countries. So let's go over them really quick, know some facts about the country. Syria is not that big. It's just a fairly small country, 71,000 square miles with a population of 23 million. Their capital is Damascus. They are ruled by a party called the Arab Socialist Party. Their president is Bashar al-Assad. This is him. And their GDP is about $60 billion a year. So it's not that big for a country like this. Iraq, on the other hand, is a bigger country, 169,000 square miles, with a population of 36 million people. Capital is Baghdad. Before 2003, it was also ruled by the Arab Socialist Party, but after the fall of Saddam's regime, now we have a federal parliamentary republic. The president of Iraq right now is Fouad Massoun. This is his picture. And the GDP of Iraq is about $240 billion. So it's almost 4 times bigger than the Syrian GDP. And the reason why is that Iraq have lots of oil. Some history about the war that happened in 2003. Back then, Saddam Hussein's regime was accused of developing weapons of mass destruction, mostly chemical and biological weapons. The Bush administration claimed that the Saddam regime can launch chemical and biological attacks against the United States in 45 minutes. I don't know how they figured this out. Also accused Saddam's regime of supporting Al-Qaeda and being involved in the 9/11 attacks. Of course, all of these intelligence were later proven to be false, but it was used by the Bush administration to justify the war and the invasion of Iraq. I want you to understand that before the invasion, I was living in Iraq. I just left Iraq in 2012, so I lived all of my life in Iraq. And until 2003, we never heard of something called Al-Qaeda. We never heard of Osama bin Laden. We never heard of car bombs or IEDs. It's true that Iraq has been into 2 wars before, 8 years of war with Iran, and then the invasion of Kuwait that led to the Desert Storm war, and then 13 years of sanctions, but we never heard anything about Al-Qaeda or Osama bin Laden or witnessed any wars inside our cities. But after 2003, we started having daily violence in Iraq. Many of the Iraqis decided to fight against the American forces under the name of resistance. And this means attacking American forces in sometimes public places, mostly crowded places, and this means lots of civilian casualties. I myself was about to get killed several times just because I was driving too close to an American convoy and they shot at me and hit my car, or I was covering a story and a gunfight happens between insurgents and the American forces and I was in the middle trying to find a place to hide myself. So Iraq became a very dangerous place to everyone. You're driving to work, you never know if the car next to you is going to be a car bomb that will explode and kill everyone. Or someone would just open the door and shoot you in the head. Or, just by driving close to a military convoy, you can get shot. These kind of things. I still remember I was with a friend of mine driving back home, and there was lots of traffic. We were stopped, and the traffic moved, and I just moved my car like a couple of feet. That's it. And then we heard a bump in the back door. We came out to see what's happening, and we found a bullet hole. So these 2 feet saved our lives, saved one of our lives. Everyone was targeted, even those who worked with the American army or any American organization. And of course, as you all know, the population in Iraq were all divided into ethnic and religious groups. Now, instead of being all Iraqis, we have Sunnis, we have Shiites, we have Kurds, we have Arabs, Yazidis, Christians, whatever, and they're all fighting each other. This map shows you the religious and ethnic groups in Iraq. And as you can see, this brown area is all Arab Sunnis. This dark green area is all Arab Shiites. But these areas, like this light green one, are mixed Arab and Sunni Shiites. This yellow area is mainly Arab Sunnis and Kurds. And this orange area are mainly Kurds. So as you can see, Iraq is a mixed country. And until 2003, I don't remember we had any problems between us, Iraqis. I didn't care which of my friends was a Sunni or a Shiite or a Kurd or Muslim or a Christian. It doesn't matter. As long as we are friends, it's fine. In the street where I used to live, we had almost 15 houses. After 2003, I discovered that 8 of them were Shiites and 7 of them were Sunnis. Before that, we never cared to know. Doesn't matter. So daily violence was going on. And as I said, anything can happen. While you're driving, while you're at home, anything. One day I got a phone call from my wife, and I was back then working for the New York Times, and we were very busy because, there's lots of things happening, and she was crying, screaming, and I told her, what's going on? And she said, a mortar shell just landed on the top of the roof. And I said, was anyone hurt? And she said, no, just the glass was shattered. And I said, so I'll fix it when I come back, don't worry. And that's it, and I closed the phone. This is how life used to be, and still is, in Iraq right now. Then something else happened. In 2006, one of the holy Shiite shrines was bombed in the city of Samarra, north of Baghdad. And back then, everyone suspected that Al-Qaeda was behind it. But the Shiites in Iraq all started blaming the Sunnis for what happened to the shrine. So this triggered a civil war, a sectarian war. Now we have Sunni militias, Shiite militias, all targeting each other and killing civilians. If your name is Ali, for example, or Sajjad, then this means that you're a Shiite. Just because this is your name, you can get killed. If your name is Marwan or Abu Bakr or Umar, you can get killed. For the simplest reason, just because you are from the other sect. Many people were killed for the wrong reason. Like he's a Shiite, but his name is Abu Bakr. Not a big deal, but the Shiite militias would think of him as a Sunni, so they kill him. I myself witnessed about 28 killings just by looking from my front house door. Shiite militias would stop like minivans and start asking people for their IDs. And if they suspect that someone is from the other sect, they force him out and they immediately shoot him in the spot. I chose to put this picture because in one of the stories that I was covering, I went to a Shiite neighborhood and I saw a Shiite militiaman with a 60 millimeter mortar cannon, and he was just firing one shell after the other. And I told him, which part of Baghdad are you targeting? And he said, a neighborhood called Fadl. And I said, but this is a mixed area. There are lots of Sunnis and Shiites there. And he said, it's fine. If a Sunni guy could get killed, he will go to hell. If a Shiite guy gets killed, he will go to heaven. Can you imagine this craziness? Anyways, this is the holy shrine that I told you about. This picture is before 2003, and this is in 2006 when it was bombed by Al-Qaeda. Besides the civil war, we have another problem back then. Now we have the Jihadists and Al-Qaeda who started coming to Iraq. Their claim was that they are here to join their Iraqi Muslim friends or brothers in their holy fight against the American infidels. They considered this war as a holy war, and it's the job of every Muslim to come to Iraq to join the fight. Not all of these foreign fighters were Arabs. Many of them were from countries like Afghanistan and Chechnya. And they started joining the Iraqi insurgents groups. Back then, they weren't giving any leading parts, so they had nothing to do with the planning or giving orders to other fighters, but they were giving like minor roles. If you're here to die for your religion, then go ahead. Here's a car bomb and go ahead and blow up yourself. And this usually happens in crowded places. And this means more and more civilians get killed. In 2004, we started hearing about a guy called Zarqawi. Jordanian nationals, and his real name is Ahmed Fadaam al-Khalayla. And he fought in Afghanistan during the Soviet invasion in the mid-50s, in the mid-80s. Then he went back to Jordan after the war ended, and there he was accused of trying to bomb one of the hotels in the capital, Amman. And he was sent to jail and remained in jail for about 6 years, and then he was released when the Jordanian king gave a full pardon to prisoners. In 2003, he went to Iraq to join the insurgency against the American forces. And in Iraq, he started his own group. He called it Tawheed wal Jihad. And he swore allegiance to Osama bin Laden and Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan. He was responsible for many attacks against the American forces, the Iraqi forces, and against civilians. And in his ideology, as a Salafist, Wahhabist, he considers everyone, even Shiite Muslims, as infidels, and unless they are converted, then they have to die. This was the way they think about them. So Al-Qaeda and the insurgents, Iraqi insurgents, they started fighting against the American forces. But when the sectarian violence started in 2006, now we have Shiite militias targeting Sunnis and vice versa. And the Iraqi insurgent groups thought that maybe it is time to put our fight with the Americans on hold, because the threat of the Shiite militias is far more great than the American threat. So the Shiite militias are targeting civilians based on their sect, killing them everywhere, and this is not good. This is not what we have signed for. We need to liberate our country, not to kill our own people. So let's try to stop the Shiite militias from doing so, and let's forget about the American forces in the meantime. The Al-Qaeda and Zarqawi, they said that, no, this is not acceptable. We will keep fighting against the American forces, and we will keep blowing up car bombs in public places. And their excuse was to show the ugly face of the occupation to the rest of the world. Like, look, this is what happens when you occupy a country. There will be resistance, and there will be lots of casualties, even if this means killing more Iraqis. In 2007, the British administration also was trying to find a way to decrease the number of the weekly attacks against the American forces. Back then, the attacks were about 200 attacks per week, and this is a lot. So they were thinking about bringing more soldiers to the country. Maybe this would help to solve the problem. Some of the tribes also in Iraq felt the threat of Al-Qaeda, so they decided to fight against them. But how can we do this? If we carry our weapons in public, then the American forces will consider us as a part of the insurgency or as terrorists, and they will shoot at us. So what should we do? Maybe we should go to the Americans and tell them, look, we want to fight Al-Qaeda. We have nothing to do with you, but we want to stop Al-Qaeda. So let us work with you. So some of the Iraqi tribes decided to form what they called back then as awakening councils. They started working with the American forces to fight Al-Qaeda, provide them with intelligence, and at the same time use the firepower of the Americans to win the battle. When this happened, some of the armed groups in Iraq also thought the same thing. So some of the insurgents decided to join these awakening councils to fight against Al-Qaeda in Iraq. And because of this cooperation, many of the Al-Qaeda strongholds and hideouts were raided, and many of the Al-Qaeda leaders were killed. But did this end the threat of Al-Qaeda in Iraq? Unfortunately, it didn't. This kept going on until 2011. When President Obama came to office, he decided to end the American presence in Iraq and put a timetable first to hand over the security file to the Iraqi forces gradually and pull the American forces back to their bases, and then try to withdraw the forces from Iraq. And December 18th, 2011, the last of the American armed vehicles crossed the borders to Kuwait. I was also there and covering the withdrawal with some of my American colleagues. These pictures shows you how the American withdrawal happened. So why am I telling you all of this? Because if I want to talk about Al-Qaeda and about ISIS especially, then we have to know something about its history, where it came from, who formed ISIS, what do they want, things like these. And it all started in Iraq, actually. As I told you before 2003, we never heard of Al-Qaeda before. We never heard of Osama bin Laden or jihadists or car bombs or anything. But all of this happened after 2003, when these foreign fighters started flowing into Iraq to join the fight against the Americans. Other things also kept happening. For example, the Arab Spring. It first started in Tunisia in 2010, then in Egypt, Libya, Yemen. All of these nations were rising against their governors, hoping to have democracy and a better life. The same thing happened in Syria. In 2011, a number of schoolboys were inspired by the Arab Spring that happened in other countries in the Middle East and North Africa. And they were just writing some graffitis, anti-Bashar al-Assad graffitis, saying that the people wants to topple the regime. And of course, in a police state like Syria, this was unacceptable. So the Syrian authorities arrested these boys and tortured them. They took off their nails and they burned their bodies and all of that. The families of the boys demonstrated in front of the police station demanding the release of their sons. But the reply of the police commander was very offensive. He literally told them that, forget about your boys, you can make more others, and if you can't, then we can help you. The people felt very offended. The next day, they attacked the ruling party headquarters and burned it, and also took over one of the mosques. But the Syrian regime retaliated by sending gunships and bombing the city. A big massacre happened. About 100 people got killed. And this was the beginning of the uprising that happened in Syria. The clashes or the civil war that happened between the civilians and the Bashar regime resulted other things. For example, many of the Syrian army officers who didn't accept the killing of their own people, they defected and formed an anti-government force. They called it the Free Syrian Army. Others also formed another group, and these guys weren't only former fighters, but they were also Muslim extremists. So they formed a group called Jabhat al-Nusra, or al-Nusra Front. Nusra means the supporters of the people. And they followed the same Salafist ideology of Al-Qaeda. And at some point, they also swore allegiance to Osama bin Laden and to Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan. Until that point, the group included mostly Syrian fighters and maybe some other nationalities, but they were mostly Arabs, like Saudi Arabia, Libya, and so on. Now, this is where ISIS comes. ISIL, or as we call it in Arabic, Daesh, stands for the Islamic State in Iraq and the Levant. It was founded in 2006 by one of the Al-Qaeda leaders. His name was Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. And back then, it wasn't named ISIL. It was named the Islamic State in Iraq, or the Iraqi Islamic State. Their goal back then was to switch Iraq into an Islamic country by imposing Islamic Sharia. So everyone was their enemy. The Shiite government was their enemy because it was Shiite. Shiites were considered as infidels, so they have to be converted or killed. Christians have to convert to Islam. Yazidis have to convert to Islam. Everyone have to become Muslim. If you want to live in this country, then you have to be a Muslim. And this is part of the Salafi ideology. Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi was killed in an American air raid in 2010. And after him, a new guy called Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi was elected to become the leader of the group. This is Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. This picture was taken in his first appearance after they controlled the city of Mosul. He gave the Friday prayer speech. And this was the first time when people saw who he was. Who is this guy exactly? His real name is Rahim Awad al-Badri, born in 1971, so he's around 44 years old. And he got a PhD in Sharia law, so he's also highly religious. Until 2003, it was thought that he was just leading the prayers in one of the mosques in western Baghdad, so he wasn't of any importance to anyone, wasn't very influential. Some of the people who were close to him described him as a very shy and peaceful person. So nobody thought that he's going to be or become the most dangerous man in the world. One of the stories says that he was detained by the American forces in 2004 near the city of Fallujah. Back then, the American forces used to detain anyone by suspicion, even if they were innocent. I have several friends who were detained and sent to jail, spent a few months, and then the American forces decided that these guys aren't dangerous, and they released them. Maybe this is what happened also to Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. But the story says that he was sent to a prison in south of Iraq called Buka. And in that prison, the American forces used to hold the most of the Qaeda leaders who were captured. And maybe this is where he was radicalized. After a while in prison, he became one of the most influential detainees. But still, the American forces decided to release him because they considered him as a low-level prisoner. Until today, background of Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi remains a mystery. Nothing is solid about his history. So in 2010, he became the leader of Al-Qaeda in Iraq. And after the killing of Osama bin Laden in 2011, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi launched several revenge attacks all over Iraq, including an attack that happened in the city of Hilla, south of Baghdad, about 62 miles south of Baghdad, and resulted the killing of about 28 soldiers and the injury of 72 others. Several car bombs attacked checkpoints, an army's checkpoints, and almost killed them all. When the civil war happened in Syria, now Baghdadi found himself another goal. Let's go to Syria to help our brothers there in their fight against Bashar al-Assad. So many of the Al-Qaeda or the Islamic State in Iraq fighters cross the borders to Syria to join the fight there. And in Syria, they started working with Al-Nusra Front. Since their ideology is the same, they're both Salafists, they both consider themselves jihadists, they started working together in fighting against Bashar al-Assad's army. Then, in 2012, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, in an audio recording broadcasted by Al Jazeera, claimed that the two groups, the Islamic State of Iraq and Al-Nusra Front, both merged together, and now they have formed the Islamic State in Iraq and the Levant, which was known later as ISIL. But the Al-Nusra Front denounced this statement. They said that, yes, we are working together against Bashar, but we know nothing about this merge that happened between the two groups. This created tension between the two groups and led to several clashes between them. Now the two groups are fighting against each other. ISIL also was known for their barbaric and monstrous acts. You've all heard about their crimes, how they behead people, how they burn them alive, and all these horrific ways of killing, to the point that even Al-Qaeda said that, come on guys, please have some mercy on people. Imagine Al-Qaeda, this terrorist organization that is also known for all of its terrorist attacks and the killing of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of people, now considering ISIL as a monstrous organization. ISIL is also recruiting children, raising them from a young age to join their fight and to believe into their ideology. They're also kidnapping and selling women as slaves. There are many slaves markets in Syria and in Iraq right now, where women are either given away to the fighters or sold for a few dollars just because they are from the Yazidi religion, or they are Christians or whatever. They've also started destroying all of these ancient sites. Maybe also you've heard about it, that happened in Iraq. The last was the city of Palmyra in Syria. And nobody understands why exactly they're doing so, but we all think that because their goal is to establish a new Islamic state, a state that is built on the Islamic Sharia in the Muslim lands. So they have to wipe out the whole history that happened before Islam, including ancient history. They're also trying to attract every Muslim in the world to come and join their alleged Muslim state. So as long as you are a Muslim, then it doesn't matter where you're from or what language do you speak. You can still come and join us because this is a global Islamic state. It's not only for Arabs, but it's for all Muslims. That's why, maybe you have noticed that many of the ISIL fighters are either from Chechnya or from Russia or Nepal, Bangladesh, Afghanistan, many of them even from Europe, and some of them from the United States, who decided to go and join ISIL. In 2014, about 500 of the ISIL fighters, armed with light weapons and pickup trucks, managed to capture the city of Mosul. In Mosul, there's about 3 million people living there, and at that time, over 34,000 Iraqi soldiers were also stationed in Mosul, and they were armed with heavy artillery, mostly American-made. The soldiers didn't fight against the ISIS fighters. In fact, they were given an order to withdraw and leave everything behind. And this made ISIL capture billions of dollars of American-made weapons. Now they're having Humvees, they're having Bradleys, they have Abrams tanks, and they have, I heard, even helicopters. Again, this is the map of Iraq and Syria, and these are the area in red is where ISIS state is. But is this the end of their dream? No. This is the end of their dream. This is what they want to do. All Muslim land, all over the world, is part of their alleged Islamic state, including parts of Asia, Europe, the Middle East, and Africa. Everywhere in the world where there are Muslims is considered part of their Islamic state. So what did they do, especially in Iraq and Syria? Let's see. Over 89,000 Iraqis were killed by ISIS since 2013 until now. And of course, the number of the Iraqi death toll is far more great than this. It's over 1 million people so far, but These are only the people who were killed by ISIS in just 3 years. In Syria, we don't know exactly how many people ISIL have killed, but we know, and according to the Syrian Network of Human Rights, that over 230,000 Syrians were killed so far in the civil war, including 20,000 children. And you can imagine, because of the civil war, the kind of destruction that happened to Syria so far. These pictures would show you before and after the war in Syria. Imagine this street here became like this, or this marketplace that became like this, or this whole neighborhood. And of course, this is not only the act of ISIS or the Al-Nusra Front. This is the act of all of the fighting parties, including the Bashar al-Assad's regime, who recently started throwing explosive barrels over his people and also using chemical weapons. More pictures that would show you the size of destruction that happened to the country. And sometimes I wonder, when the war ends and one of the parties win, whether it's Bashar and his regime or whether it's the opposition, how are they going to build back the country? How long will it take them? This whole country that was built in 40 or 50 years was turned into rebels in just 3 years. I feel lots of pain when I look at these pictures. Although I'm an Iraqi, but my family and I lived for almost 2 years in Syria during the civil war. So I still remember how beautiful it was, how peaceful it was. About 30% of their national income comes from tourism. So you can imagine how many Europeans and even Americans used to go to Syria to spend the summer or to visit the ancient sites. All of this is gone. So if the country's infrastructure is so badly destroyed, then what happened to the people? Millions of Iraqis and Syrians have been displaced. They had to leave their cities, leave their homes because of the fight and because of the destruction that happened. The irony is that in 2006, when the civil war happened in Iraq, we, the Iraqis, had to flee to Syria to find safety. Because back then, Iraq was considered the most dangerous country in the world. No one wants to go to Iraq because it's so dangerous. In 2011, when the civil war happened in Syria, the Syrians started coming to Iraq looking for safety. Because now their country is far more dangerous than Iraq itself. They know that there is lots of daily violence going on in Iraq, But still, it's safer than staying in Syria. In 2006, over 1.2 million Iraqis fled to Syria. But now we have about 7 million Syrians who are trying to find refuge. According to the UNHCR report, about 4 million Syrian people left their country trying to find safety into neighboring countries. And those who are still in Syria, about 7.6 million of them are displaced, living in hard conditions, and in areas that are difficult to reach. So meaning that even if we want to send them aids, then there is no way to do this. The country that took most of the Syrians was Turkey. They took about 1.8 million Syrians. And you can imagine the pressure the Turkish government have right now, especially on their economy, and because they're not prepared to receive this high number of refugees. So they've started building new refugee camps. So far they have built 20, and they're finishing 2 others, so it's going to be 22 camps so far. Lebanon, which is just a tiny country, the population there is 3 million people. Now they received almost 1.2 million refugees, and you can imagine what impact this have on their economy. And some of the reports that I'm seeing on Lebanese TV or the articles that I'm reading, some of the Lebanese decided to leave their country because there is no space for them to live anymore. In Iraq, we have about 250 Syrians, 250,000 Syrians who are seeking refuge there. In Jordan, we have 630,000. In Egypt, we have about 132,000. Notice that in countries like in Kuwait or in Saudi Arabia, which are extremely rich countries, they have received 0 refugees. They didn't take anyone. Although, and if we want to talk more about ISIS and the organization itself, we have to ask who's funding ISIS, where are they getting the money from? It's mostly from Saudi Arabia and the Gulf states. Billions of dollars are being paid by sheikhs from these countries to support the jihadists in Syria and Iraq. But when it comes to help the refugees, they're doing nothing. This is how the refugees are living right now. In tents that's hardly protecting them from the rain during the winter and the heat during the summer. And this is how the Iraqi refugees are living right now. By looking at these 2 sets of pictures, can you tell which ones are the Iraqis and which ones are the Syrians? They all look the same. They're refugees. Many of the Iraqis and the Syrians have lost hope in going back to their own country, so they thought about finding a new home for themselves. Why not going to Europe? So many of them started traveling to Turkey, and especially to the city of Izmir, and from there they can cross the Mediterranean by the help of a smuggler on a boat or a yacht, and go to Greece, and from there they can continue their journey until they reach their destination in Sweden, Austria, or Germany. The smuggling of refugees is still happening. According to the IOM, over 5,000 refugees are crossing the Aegean Sea every day. Can you imagine the number? 5,000. The authorities in Greece are having a difficult time handling these increasing numbers of refugees who are arriving every day. They don't even have a place for them to sleep. And with the bad economy Greece have right now, it's getting more difficult for them to be able to handle these growing numbers. So if I want to go to Turkey and try to cross the Mediterranean, I have to look for a smuggler. Where can I find one? Easy. Facebook. Smuggling became a business right now for so many. Some of them Turkish, some of them Iraqis, and some of them Syrians. If you want to cross from the city of Izmir to Turkey, then it will cost you around $700 to $2,500 a piece. Look at these websites. This Facebook page is named Traveling, Immigration, and Refuge. And here, this guy, for example, his name is Shaji whatever. In his post, he's saying, Assalamu alaikum, brothers and sisters, we will have daily trips from Turkey to the Greek islands on a yacht or jet ski. And this one is saying that we have daily trips from Istanbul to Greece. The launching point will be from Istanbul until we reach the island of Mytilene. The boat can take 40 passengers, and it would cost $1,000 plus insurance for each passenger. So you can imagine how much money these people are making. This guy is saying, Assalamu alaikum, to our brothers, the Syrians and the Iraqis. We have daily trips from Istanbul to Greece. We have a 9 meters long boat. The gathering will be in Istanbul. The trip will take from 30 to 45 minutes on the sea. We can have 35 to 40 people. The cost will be $1,100 plus insurance. And this website, and unfortunately this is in Arabic, but it will explain to you everything about the trip from Turkey until you reach your final destination in Germany or in Austria. Step by step, even how to avoid the authorities in each country. Refugees became a business, a profitable business for many. Amanda, are we good on time?
8 minutes.
Okay. Can you imagine being in a boat like this in the middle of the Mediterranean? Does it worth risking your life? But for these people, yes. Because if they stay home, this means that they will die. And maybe, just maybe, I would have a chance to cross to the other side and find a new life for me and my family. According to the UNHCR, about 2,500 migrants have died so far trying to cross the Mediterranean Sea. And of course, this is also can be inaccurate because we actually don't know how many people died. So, why some of the European countries prefer not to receive refugees? If we take Syria, for example, when the civil war happened in Iraq, and as I told you, the Syrians had received almost 1.2 million Iraqis back then. Do you know what this added to their economy? Higher price for food, more consumption of mortar, more need for medical treatment, more schools for the children, more care for the elders and the disabled, more pressure on the labor market. And in a country with a limited budget like Syria, this is a crisis. But still, the Syrians took this huge number of Iraqis in. And I'm trying to be quick here because we're running out of time. It also created some other problems because most of the Iraqi families who crossed to Syria, they have lost their households, the men, either killed or detained. So the wives have to take care of the families right now. This created other problems. Some of these families prefer to go to prostitution or to drug trade or something like this. And this means higher crime rate in every country that they go to. Meaning that the government have to solve this by providing more and more jobs to the new arrivals. So they won't have to take this path. And it's already happening right now. Economic situation, according to the UNHCR, is having an impact on the capacity of readiness of many countries in Europe right now. Going really quick, who are the countries who are taking refugees? We have Germany, who took the lion's share, and they already took about 98,000 Syrian refugees. This is according to CNN. And it doesn't say anything about the Iraqi or other nationalities, those who managed to get to Germany. Sweden took about 64,000 Syrian refugees. France took about 6,700, and they promised to take 24,000 in 2 years' time. Britain, about 7,000 refugees, and they are focusing on the refugees in the resettlement camps or refugee camps, not those who have already entered Europe. Denmark, 11,000, Hungary, 18,000, Spain, 5,000, Austria, 18,000, Netherlands, 14,000, Switzerland, 8,000, Bulgaria, 15,000, Italy, 2,000, Canada, 3,000, and they promised to accept up to 10,000, and the United States, only 1,500. So to end my speech today, I have a question for you. What can we do to help? And do you think we are somehow responsible for what happened? Thank you so much.